Good morning. Happy Wednesday. It's Miss Trangle. This is going to be the second day and the second half of section 1-3 in your Big Ideas textbook. Today's Wednesday, September 23rd, so make sure you set up your notes with your 3 horizontal lines, your vertical line. Here is the date and subject up here, 9/23/20. Section, we're on 1-3 part 2, which will go over how to find an endpoint, not the midpoint, but the endpoint, and how to find the distance between 2 locations. Our essential question, you can abbreviate that as EQ, it should be highlighted. What is coordinate geometry? Sorry, sometimes these get cut off. Coordinate geometry, and how is it used? So we'll answer that question. And we have actually 2 learning targets. Learning target 1D is I can find the endpoint, so it's related to yesterday, but a little different. I can find the endpoint of a segment if given one endpoint and the midpoint. So instead of getting 2 endpoints and just finding your midpoint like we did yesterday, you would be getting 1 endpoint, 1 midpoint, and you'd find the other endpoint. All right, so something kind of like this. But you would know this, and you'd be looking for that. So slightly different. Okay, our second learning target, 1E, I can calculate the distance between 2 points in the coordinate plane. All right, let's go over our distance formula. Distance equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So please make sure you pause the video, you copy down the distance formula exactly. This is on all formula sheets that you'll be getting for tests, for the MCA, for anything like that. So you don't need to memorize this. A couple keywords you might see in problems that would indicate you should do distance is distance, but also how far away is something, and length. What is the length of the trip from Minneapolis to Chicago? That's asking for distance. All right, and this is all in our section called coordinate geometry because we're talking about if points are on a coordinate grid. All right, so we've got a few examples. So go ahead, set up example problems, or EX for short, and highlight that. All right, here's kind of an important question, so I put it in the side, and I do want you to write this down because this tends to be a hard skill for people, so I want to make sure that you're writing that question. How do you find the endpoint if given one midpoint and the endpoint? Then take a minute and write down the example. Example 1, the midpoint of TU is at 2, 4. One endpoint is at 1, 1. Find the coordinates of endpoint U. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit for part 1. You may want to sketch a picture. It doesn't need to be exact. I don't have a coordinate grid. So TU, the midpoint is at 2, 4. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. One endpoint is at 1, 1. All right, so here's T. Here's the midpoint right here. And we are looking for U. So that's kind of my situation. So I could get a graph and I could figure it out with a graph. I am going to show you algebraically just because sometimes your answer is not a whole number. Sometimes your coordinate grid is a large number, like 500, and you don't want to make a graph. So I will show you that. Also, I always get questions when something is hard. Not when something is actually useless, but when something is hard, people say, when is this useful? So just to kind of give you some context, if you ever use Google Maps or any kind of like GPS directions where it says, go straight on Smith Avenue, turn right on Annapolis, that is actually using coordinate geometry. What that program has done is superimposed a coordinate grid over the US, and every corner has like a coordinate grid location. Anytime you fly in an airplane, they're also using this technology because we don't necessarily have like roads and stop signs and highways in the sky. The Army, all kinds of stuff for navigation purposes in deserts and oceans, all kinds of stuff. The Navy. So it's a super, super useful thing, even if you're not directly calculating a computer program, you're probably using the technology that has this math behind it. Okay, side tangent, we'll go on. All right, so let's just remind ourselves, what's our midpoint formula? X1 plus X2 divided by 2, Y1 plus Y2 divided by 2. All right, so a couple of things we need to be careful. I only know one endpoint. So I know one endpoint is at 1, 1 right here. That's my X1, Y1. For my X2, Y2, I don't know those. So when I start to fill in my formula, my X1 is 1. My X2 is unknown. However, I do know what that should equal. When I calculate this, it should equal 2, because that's the X of my midpoint. So I'm going to set that equal to 2. Where did I get the 2 from? It's the X value in my midpoint. All right, and now this is an equation right here, an equation that I can solve. So it might look a little scary because it has a fraction, it has an x2, but it's actually a not too long of an equation. So first, I don't like fractions. Let's get rid of the fraction. So a fraction is division. Right now, this is being divided by 2. The opposite of dividing by 2 is to multiply by 2. All right, that's going to cancel out my fraction. I have 1 plus x2 over here. On the right of my equation, 2 times 2 gives me 4. From here, you might be able to do it in your head. 1 plus what gives you 3? Or you can minus 1 if you want to write it out. Your x2 is 3. So that means up here for you, the first part of my answer is 3. All right, we're going to do the same process for the y. So here's my y, y1. What is our y1? Our y1 is 1. What is our y2? We don't know. We don't know y2. We do know what it should equal. What should it equal? It should equal 4. And then I'm going to do that same process to solve. Okay, I'm going to multiply by 2 to undo a fraction. Multiply by 2. Whatever you do on one side, you do to the other. So I have 1 plus y2 equals 4 times 2 is 8. Let's minus 1. My y2 is 7. So my answer is 3, 7, which definitely seems possible if plausible if I look at my graph for where that point would be. Okay, I will zoom out. Number 2, we're going to be doing the same thing, so take a minute, write down your problem. The midpoint of VW is at -1, -2. One endpoint is at 4, 4. Find the coordinates. So I would encourage you to pause this video and try number 2 on your own. That's what you should be doing. I will walk you through it. So -1, -2 is the midpoint. 4, 4 is one endpoint. So we should be getting something down here for V. And we're going to find the coordinates of V. W is at 4, 4. That's my x1, y1. And M is at -1, -2. So start out with your midpoint formula, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. You're finding the average. Y1 plus y2 divided by 2, finding the average. So see how far you can get. Plug in your numbers. X1 is 4. I'm going to start with the x's. X2 I don't know. That's what I'm trying to find. It should equal the x value of my midpoint. It should equal -1. Same 2 steps. Get rid of your fraction. Multiply by 2. So I get 4 plus x2 equals -2. -1 times 2 is -2. I'm going to minus 4. X2 equals -6. -2 minus 4 is -6. You're going to do the same thing with your y's. My y1 should be 4 also, right here, 4. My y2 I don't know. but it should equal -2. Do your same 2 steps, times by 2 to get rid of your fraction, times by 2. So I end up with 4 plus y2 equals -4 minus 4 minus 4 y2 equals -8. So my answer is -6, comma -8, which seems good since it is way down here in the negatives. So if you need to pause, rewatch, if you need to email, get help with that, make sure you will need to, for the test and the quiz, you will need to be able to find the endpoint. How will you know when to do which? The question will either say find the midpoint, in which you just plug and chug like we did yesterday, or it will say find the endpoint, in which you'll do this process solving the equation.